Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh, and I'm the program coordinator for Global Connections. We are really excited to have our WCU Global Campus Career Counselor, Chris Miller, here with us today to talk about the Career Interest Assessment. I would like to point out again the chat box over in the bottom left corner that we've been chatting back and forth with. We would like this webinar to be a very conversational webinar, so if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and Chris or I will be able to answer them for you. So without any further ado, let's welcome Chris Miller.
Thank you, Josh. Let's go ahead and get this switched on also. Thank you. And welcome to the Interest Assessment webinar. Like Josh said, I am the Career Counselor for the Global Campus. I have been for over 8 years now, and I'm here to help Global Campus students with any career development question, issue that they're facing, and things like resume, job search, selecting an academic major, graduate school research, and things like that are some of the more common topics. So for some of the housekeeping, Josh mentioned that the chat box is there in my screen at the lower left-hand side, and that is the best way to communicate with either of us through this webinar. And I will try to answer the questions as they pop up for this one. I sometimes get going on a roll and I miss them, so I'm sorry if I do, and I will scroll back to them at the end if I do miss something. But yeah, for this one I'll definitely be asking for some input about the codes that you received, and I'll be sharing some of the information about how to interpret those and how to get more out of your results. So that's who I am, that's what we're doing. I'll talk a little bit more about why later on, process and timeline. We talked about process. Timeline, it should take a neighborhood of 35 minutes, I would say. That's usually where it's at. I would start by taking a look at the career development process in general. And for our topic today, we're definitely in the know yourself part of this. And I think this is a nice little image, a nice little snapshot of what the career development process is like. It's not all inclusive. I'm sure there are things that are missing since, the experience varies from person to person, but no matter what throughout your life, you're most likely going to have several different jobs and several different occupations which encompass, at least in the way that career counselors talk about it, you have one career throughout your entire life, several different jobs throughout that career. So I know some of that language gets kind of muddled up with career development topics sometimes, but we have a lot of different stages in our life where we go through. We'll hit a wall maybe with our job. Maybe we thought we were going to go one way, and either we decide to go another way, or an external factor or force makes us select a different route. And so we have these processes of decay and renewal, as it's called in one of the schools of thought with career counseling. And so when we hit one of those points, or if we're just interested in taking a step back, it's usually best to start with the self-assessment piece, looking at different topics of career self-assessment. So today we're talking about interests, but there are other things like career skills, values, and personality. And next week we'll be doing a career work personality webinar and talking about kind of the Myers-Briggs Jungian typology theory and how that fits with the career development process. And as it turns out, with career interest and career exploration, it's not very applicable, but with things like this, we're looking at, what are our general interests and disinterests, and we kind of look at how those can play a role in career research and finding a career or an occupation that is meaningful and worthwhile for you. So that's where we're starting today. We'll also get in a little bit of the exploring options piece. I'll talk about what to do with your results when you're moving on to the career researching part. And let's go ahead and move on to limitations. So looking at any career assessment, Richard Bowles, who is the author of What Color Is Your Parachute, many people know it. I can get the screen there. This is last year's edition, actually. Well, it's 2015. There's a 2016 edition. And it's updated every year or two or so, and it's been published since, I believe, 1970. So we're around 45 years, getting closer to that 50-year mark. And that is the one resource I would recommend if you are really either starting out or trying to reevaluate your career options, that book, What Color is Your Parachute, is really probably the best starting resource for assessing yourself, assessing your options, and looking at ways to go about finding jobs and interview techniques and all sorts of different career topics. So I would really recommend that resource. It's this last year edition you can probably find for about $10, and the new ones come out, they're about $20. So it's a minimal investment, and I think it's a very valuable resource. So some of the things that he's mentioned on jobhuntersbible.com, which is kind of a companion piece to the book, is that no test can fully measure you. You should let intuition be your guide when you're taking these assessments. Try not to predetermine how you want the test to turn out. So that thought is, if you are, let's say, interested in becoming a museum curator, there's a nice random one, you wouldn't want to think of as you're answering the questions, you would not want to think, how would a museum curator answer this question? So you just try to answer, honestly, without thinking too much, and just letting intuition be your guide. This is to help you look for clues and suggestions. This will not tell you what the perfect career is for you, and you should try out different assessments to get more of an idea. And I'll show you one a little bit later on, which is essentially the same thing. It's a Holland code assessment, but it's a more valid code because it's a more in-depth assessment. And if you really want to get an accurate picture of what your three-letter Holland code is, then I would recommend taking the Strong Interest Inventory, which I will show you later. So REASSEC is the acronym for the Holland hexagon. The R standing for R is realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And I should point out that one of the core concepts that I'll discuss here in a second is that these little wedges here, these letters aren't just listed in random order. There's an actual statistical significance to how these are placed on this hexagon. So a guy by the name of John Holland in, I believe, the late 60s started theorizing these Holland codes and this type of somewhat like it's called a trait factor theory. It was one of the older career development theories. And some of the ideas behind this is that career choice is an expression of one's personality, and that's definitely an outdated concept, but this is how it came to be. So people seek out occupational environments that will be congruent to their personalities. Of course, that's true, and that's usually more beneficial to both the person and to the employer when that's the case. But personality is much more complex than just interests and disinterests, and that's one of the things we'll talk about next week. But even in the terms of career assessment, personality is such a vast concept that it doesn't even come close to some of the general, well, I say general, but some of the personality assessments like the MMPI, which is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. But even that one, although it's probably the best personality assessment, it's compared to, or I should say, it's in the context of psychopathology. So it's kind of like an assessment trying to find out what's wrong with your personality in terms of all these abnormalities in psychopathology. So even that has its limitations. But for this, that was one of the key ideas of this theory. So personality could be assessed by measuring likes and dislikes for an occupation. Somewhat true, somewhat not true. And the congruence is between a personality and an occupational environment. So you have interests, and then a job also has interests and disinterests. And so congruence is when things come together, you share both of those. So congruence is also an outdated term, but this is just some of the ideas of the theory. So people's types generally develop between the ages of 18 and 30 for both men and women. And I've mentioned these types, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in depth in a moment. But I want to talk about the concepts of the theory first. So calculus, consistency, and differentiation are three of the main key concepts. So like I said, these are these are arranged in a statistically significant order. So conventional is next to realistic because the conventional type is statistically similar to realistic. They share similarities. Conventional is across from artistic. So those things are not as highly correlated, which makes sense if you think about it. Something that is more artistic versus something that is more conventional, they would probably not have very similar characteristics. So consistency is when a person's code, so they're 3 letters, a consistent code is when their letters are close or adjacent to one another in this hexagon. So if someone has a code, for example, CES, conventional, enterprising, social, conventional is next to enterprising, enterprising is next to social. So that would be known as a code with high consistency. And again, this isn't something to be taken with a value judgment. There's no such thing as a good Holland code or a bad Holland code. But people who have more similar interests will have more predictability with finding career matches, suggested career matches. So that's the idea behind that. Differentiation is how well defined or peaked your code is. And so this is something you can see actually pretty well with the ONET profile that you've completed. So what you want with differentiation is to see something like a pyramid or a triangle pattern where you have a high interest area in one of these 6, and then a little bit lower in a couple others, and then much lower interest in the other areas. So you'll see kind of a no interest, some interest, a lot of interest as it peaks up and then goes back down. So that's called differentiation. So what does all that mean? So in general, low consistency, so if your types aren't close to one another on the hexagon, and low differentiation, so if you don't have high interest in one area, or you have a lot of interest in all the areas or not a lot of interest in any of the areas, then you'll have less predictability with your career choices and the matches that they present to you. So that's all that means. But some of the interesting things are, I think, that this assessment takes into consideration interest and disinterest. So let's talk about each area. Just let me share some more information about each specific area of the Holland hexagon to give you kind of more of an idea of what they're like. So with the realistic, some of the traits are mechanical and athletic abilities. You like to work outdoors with tools and machines. It might be described as conforming, frank, hard-headed, honest, humble, materialistic, natural, normal, persistent, practical, shy, and thrifty. Investigative type, they have math and science abilities. They like to work alone and solve problems. Might be described as analytical, complex, critical, curious, independent, intellectual, introverted, pessimistic, precise, and rational. Artistic, artistic skills obviously, enjoys creating original work, has a good imagination. May be described as complicated, disorderly, emotional, idealistic, imaginative, or imaginative, I should say, impulsive, independent, introspective, non-conforming, and original. Social, likes to help, teach, and counsel people, and may be described as cooperative, friendly, generous, helpful, idealistic, kind, responsible, sympathetic, tactful, understanding, and warm. Enterprising has traits of leadership and public speaking abilities. Interested in money and politics, likes to influence people, described as agreeable, ambitious, attention-getting, domineering, energetic, extroverted, impulsive, optimistic, self-confident, and sociable. And lastly, conventional, clerical and math abilities, likes to work indoors and to organize things, described as conforming, careful, efficient, obedient, orderly, persistent, practical, thrifty, and unimaginative. So those are just some of the traits of each type, broken down a little bit more in detail, and gives you a little bit more information about, why it looks like it does and what these letters actually mean. So you guys completed the ONET Interest Profiler, which is the free version, boiled down version of something like the Strong Interest Inventory. Also, I'm going to use this resource, the Self-Directed Search, SDS. I know this is available online, I think for $5, but I would say if you found this exercise to be meaningful, I'd recommend that you do the Strong Interest Inventory, which is $15 for students, which is offered through Washington State University. And if you are interested in that, you'll want to follow up with me afterward. And I have some of these resources out to kind of look more at our types that we have and to give you maybe some more information than you found with the ONET Interest Profiler, because it does a good job, I think, of showing the job areas by codes and the levels of preparation needed for each one, and it'll give you that great fit versus good fit, bright outlook, green jobs, and training programs also listed for some, so that's great information for sure. But without someone to help you, really interpret what the thing means, and maybe if you're not finding a lot of options, I think that's where this is helpful. And one of those ideas is permutations. But first, before I talk about permutations, let's talk about the codes that we have here today. So I was an SEA, Social, Enterprising, and Artistic. Let's jump back here for a second. And S is next to E, and E and A are not across from each other, but one apart from via social, so it's a consistent code type. I don't remember about my differentiation. I think it was well defined, but I'm not positive. Okay, so ESA, so Josh is in the SA, so they have a very similar type, which I'm not surprised by. Let's go forward here. E next to S is next to A, so that one's even more consistent. So looking at some of those, there should be some of those job matches that maybe make sense to you because your type is consistent, because the letters are close to, or adjacent to one each other on the scale. So I'm going to go into my occupations finder here, the SDS, and I know the ONET also gave you some suggested matches, but these ones could be different, they could be more, they could be the same. So I'm going to go into ESA. ESA is one. Oh yeah. So ESA, because it's consistent, because of its consistency, the code type, there are several jobs listed. So while I'm reading off some of these, if other people joining today want to type in their Holland code in the chat box, I'll go through some of the other potential job matches for those types too. So for ESA, we have, so Josh, you'd be amazing at all of these. No, that's not necessarily the case. That's not how this works. But these are suggested job matches because people in these careers who are also have reached a level of job satisfaction. They like what they do. They're happy with what they do. They have very similar interests and disinterests to you. These people are managing newspaper editors, judges, placement director. So you'll get something like a placement director, and that could be, I don't know, maybe an adoption agency. It could be a lot of different things. There's a tool that I'll talk about in a little bit later called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. You can use that tool to look at these occupational titles. Motion picture director, or producer, I should say. Social welfare administrator, artist manager, association executive. Again, these are ESA types. Director of admissions. There's a lot of them here, so I'm going to scan through. E-commerce merchandising manager, so something for Amazon, I would guess. Foreign service officer, a literary agent, a lobbyist, medical social worker, recreation supervisor, wholesaler, dance studio manager. I don't know you well, Josh, but that's something to look into. Flight attendant, nursery manager. What do we have here? A lot of sales positions, photographer, things of that nature. CIE, let's take a step back here. C and I are not opposite of one another, but they're not adjacent either. And then E and I are opposite one of another, but C and E are close. So I would think with a code like this, and again, the first letter is the one you scored highest in, and then the second letter is your second highest score, third letter is your third highest score, just to make sure that's clear. That's not always clear when you get your results, I know, with ONET. It's one of the limitations of that one specifically. So this one isn't the highest with consistency, but it's also not a CA code. So, I mean, there will be some some career suggestions, but for code like yours, I will talk about permutations, which is actually relevant to all code types, but more so for people who don't have high consistency. AIF, A and I are adjacent, and A and S are adjacent. I and S are not opposite, so that's very similar to my code in terms of how it's actually laid out on the hexagon. So you'll likely have more job suggestions and more predictability. So let me read off some of those. So CIE, let's see if we have any in here. C codes. Sit in the back. C is in the back. And there are far fewer for conventional ones. CIE. This might be one of the ones where we talk about permutations. Oh no, okay. So for CIE, there's cost accountant, building inspector, and investment analyst. Only 3 listed through SDS's Occupations Finder through the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. That does not mean there are only 3 potential job matches for you. And I will talk about other ones for you in a second. AIS is probably in the beginning. Not far. Let's read a sec. AIS is hiding. AIS. Where are you? AIS. There we go. Similar situation then. For AIS, it lists philologist. I'm not sure what that is. Paper and prints restorer. So for these 2 types, what you'll want to do is look at permutations. Permutations are essentially different arrangements of your type. And for this free one, you might not actually be a CIE or an AIS. It's just the best guess given the limited information that they can assess. So CIE is the dominant code. I'm typing this in the chat box. You'd also want to look at CEI codes, ICE, IEC, ECI, and EIC. So you want to look at all those different permutations, and I'll have some other resources that I'll share with you here, and you can get the slides for this presentation also afterward. So the next dominant one, I want to go back to C's because that was the dominant code. So there's just not a lot of C's in general here in this one. Customs inspector, fingerprint clerk. ICE, so is I the second dominant code. I would assume investigative would have more listings. RIA, beginning. IEC, IEC, Highway Administrative Engineer, different engineering ones. Photogrammetric, Pollution Control, and Fire Protection Engineer, all of those. And ICE also suggests that you look at the permutation. So for that one, I would definitely recommend looking into the strong interest inventory just to make sure that that's the actual code for you. It could be, but you'll really want to. Oh, I'm glad that Donut lists more careers. The Occupation Finder is more of a booklet that goes with the assessment, so it will be limited. There's the Dictionary of Occupational Titles you could find at a library. I don't know if you could find it online. I know the Occupational Outlook Handbook is based on that, but if you really wanted to see all the classifications in the U.S. through the Department of Labor, you'd want that Dictionary of Occupational Titles, the DOT, and it would have a plethora of them listed. So I believe AIS was the other one. So for that one, again, I'm going back to the chat box. AIS, ASI, IAS, ISA, SAI, SIA. So you want to look at all those different permutations too. And I will take a quick look at some of those. ASI, exhibit artist, copywriter, dance therapist, laserist, painter, reporter, ceramic restorer, and even this is probably about was probably about 10 years old. So some of these occupations might not even exist anymore. So I always find pretty interesting. Like the philologer. I'll have to look up what that is. AIS, so AIS, ASI, IAS would be the next one. IAS, where are you at? Dictionary editor, art appraiser, economist. So not a lot of options with those permutations, but if you use the ONET resources from the assessment you took, you'll have a lot more options listed there. But I think it's interesting, and it's important if you do have what I would call a difficult code type. Not that it's good or bad, but it's difficult because the consistency isn't there. It's very important to look at those permutations. And some of the resources that I'll provide to you, and I can jump to that right now, will give you more options for looking at your dominant code and the permutations to find more career-suggested matches. So I'll also have the Educational Opportunities Finder, which matches code types with academics, so with academic majors, academic offerings. With the Global Campus, there aren't as many as you would have at the main campus, but I do have the types for each one, for each of the undergraduate academic majors that we offer. So the code type that best fits accounting is CEI, which is a permutation of, was it CIE that we had? Yeah, CIE. So it would be a suggested match for you, accounting as an academic major. Management degree, RES. And that, I haven't looked at how that changes through the HR track in the other one. So that's something I need to do. MIS students would be a best fit for an ISR code. CrimJ would be IES. Human development, IRS. Psychology, ISE, because that's really that investigative look at the research side of psychology. Social sciences, SIE. Humanities, SAI. And hospitality business major, ESR. So those are some of the academic majors and the codes that best fit those. That doesn't mean, if you're like this, and I'm an SEA is what I am, and I was a psychology major. Psychology is fascinating to me. I didn't have as much interest in the research side because I didn't have a high investigative code, so that makes sense. But psychology was good for me and very meaningful, and I'm a different type, so just kind of to show you how things can play a role. So for the career exploration part of this, you've taken the assessment, you have your dominant type, you're starting to compile a list of potential jobs, or maybe you'll come across something that you don't know, like the one I found earlier, philology. You go to, and you've looked at your permutations, and you've explored those job titles also. You start to compile that list, and you take that list to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which used to be an actual physical handbook, of course, and now it's available online through the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. I will take you on a web tour of that now just to show you what it's like, and those are some of the things listed there that it does. So what's the job? What do they do? What's the work environment like? How do you prepare to become one? What's the pay like? Salary is very important. Work value. Job outlook. So is the, given the name, Occupational Outlook Handbook, is the actual occupation you're interested in a stage of growth or decline, and maybe you have to go on to get a PhD or something to do something that you're interested in, so you can research similar occupations if you don't want to commit to all that education. And also additional information like relevant professional associations you might want to network with or join. There's a wealth of information here. So I'll do a quick web tour there. Let's see. I'm going to try to do, just bear with me one second here while I attempt to do copy and paste, because sometimes it doesn't like to work with me. And I understand I'm showing you something different right now. I'll go back. Okay, just a moment. Control V. Occupational Outlook Handbook is, I'll put it in the chat box, www.bls.gov/OOH. Excellent. And this is what the main page will look like. So I'm going to just go, you can search, any way you want to, just the search bar here, search handbook at the top is probably the easiest way if you know what you're looking for. Something that I like to do is kind of go down to this A through Z index here and just click on a letter and see, alphabetically job titles beginning with that letter. So of course this isn't something you're going to sit down and digest in one sitting. There's a lot of information here. So I'm going to look up, just out of curiosity here, philology. I don't even know if I'm spelling that right. Because that came up, no results. It's not going to work for me. I'll have to do some other research on that later. Okay, let's go back. What did I mention? I mentioned, museum curator. Let's see, curator. I don't know if I have to put museum or not. There we go. Archivists, curators, and museum workers. So I click on that, and it's going to give me a pop-up. So I don't think you can follow me with a pop-up. See if I can do it in tab. Oh, no, I can't. Okay, so it's giving me a pop-up. It's something you can do on your own. You can also try to share, but it doesn't always work if I share my desktop. So the first page it gives you will be a summary of all those points that I listed before. It has what they do, work environment, how to become one, pay, job outlook, state and area data, that's new. So for the 2014 median pay for salary for someone interested in a career like this, it was about $46,000 per year. So someone can take that information and maybe say, salary is my highest work value, and work values are something you can consider through a work value assessment. But they say, that maybe is not enough, so they'll look at similar occupations. I click on that link, and it shows me anthropologists, archaeologists, craft and fine artists, historians, and librarians. So something you might want to research further if you are interested in that. Just one of the ways in which you can use this tool. How do I become one? Again, I'm looking at curator, museum worker. Curators typically need a master's degree in art history, archaeology, or museum studies. Students with internship experience may have an advantage in the competitive job market. So it has information like that, and actually for this one it has it for museum technicians, conservators, I have a hard time saying archivists because I want to say archivists, which doesn't sound right to me. But it breaks down each area and what you would need in terms of education or licensure requirements, things like that. What's the work environment like? Well, for a lot of them, it's going to be in a museum, and most people know what that's like. But there are also governmental museums or facilities, educational services, working and teaching, the, college level, something like that. And it talks about work schedules. Maybe that's a new edition. That's it. That also might just be available for this one specific job. So we're having a little, it's probably because I had the pop-up there. I'm just doing a quick web tour. That's probably the reason why that happened. I didn't know it was going to make me do a pop-out into a separate window. So that's just a brief look at the Occupational Outlook Handbook. I really recommend checking that out as your main career researching tool, or at least as your starting point. Because once you start to gather information about a career you might be interested in, then what you want to do is actually go talk to someone who's doing that job. So career paths then and now, just a little bit kind of about, in the beginning I said what, where, when, why. So why do we do this? Why do we take the time to do these career assessments? And as a career counselor, it's something I want people to do anyway, regardless of where, if you really know what you want to do, then it's probably not the most meaningful exercise. But if you're considering options or you're in that process of renewal, you've gone through a change, I think it's an important starting point. One of the reasons is we have the opportunity, we have the privilege to do this now, whereas you look back in time, in U.S. history, we didn't always have that. A lot of these assessments were developed developed later on in time, but were originated through World War I and World War II, because they're taking all these draftees, these soldiers in, and they can't all go into combat. A lot of them have skills that are relevant in other ways, be it communication or mechanical abilities. So they developed assessments for trying to figure out, where you fit into that world, into that military world. And of course, this was just men back then. And then men coming home from war back then, what do we do then? And that's where a guy named Frank Parsons wrote a book called Choosing a Vocation. He took a lot of these soldiers returning from war and had them run a lot of, skill assessments, mechanical aptitudes, and things like that to try to figure out, where they fit in the world of work coming back from war. And you move that on a little farther, and we develop it more into, work personality, skill assessment, interest assessment, value assessment. There are other ones I'm blanking right now, but all these different career areas to assess. We have these opportunities now where we don't just grow up and have to choose something because of our geography. Some people do, but if you're a college student, you have more opportunities to engage in these kinds of activities where, you're not a product. You don't have to select a career because you're a product of your own geographical area, or, family influence is obviously still pervasive in some instances, and that there are cultural differences with that too. But, we have these opportunities now to do these things and think about what might be an ideal fit for us. And I don't think everybody has that aha moment where they find their dream career, but if you engage in like a work values assessment and an interest assessment, you'll at least find things that you can say, between industries, comparing industry to industry to industry, I know this is what's important for me with my work and my job. So I can try to find something that'll try to check off as many boxes as possible. And while gender gaps and cultural gaps obviously still exist, they are narrowing in U.S. cultures at least. And some of those gaps are prevalent in other industries compared to others, but they, the gaps are narrowing, and we have these opportunities to try to engage in things that help us promote a better life for us and more job satisfaction. So I think that's kind of my career path then and now speech. So I've talked about some of these before. Next week we're going to do a work personality assessment, which is based off Carl Jung's typological theory, which is more commonly known as the Myers-Briggs type indicator nowadays. And so look for that at Connections website, connections.wsu.edu, and other career events that are happening this week. There's one, I believe, on Thursday, which is another webinar by a career coach who's going to talk more about career interest, but more in the vein of your dependable strengths and helping you find a dream job based on what you're really good at and how to identify those things. So that's something you'll definitely want to look into also. And I list some of these different assessments you can take, and I can provide those to you if you're interested in them. And I list social media assessments at the bottom because they're fun. So if you want to find out, which Game of Thrones character you are, no, it's not super relevant for careers. I think do it because it's fun if you want to. Don't take a lot out of it. A lot of meaning. So I guess I got to the end there. How did that happen? So let me know if you have any questions. You can reach me. There's my email address and my phone number, and then the Career Web support site for Global Campus students and the blog. And I will end it here. I'll stick around for questions, but I will quickly pass it over to Josh also. And thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks again for tuning in with us this afternoon. I hope you guys got a lot out of that webinar. I have copied and pasted a link to a Global Connections survey in the chat box. If you would mind taking a few minutes to fill that out and let us know what you thought about today's program, and your answers help us guide to where we take programming in the future. As Chris talked about, he will be doing a second webinar next Tuesday at same time, same place, noon. He will be talking about career personality assessment and how that kind of intertwines in your career choices. He also talked about, we have Scott Barlow starting this Thursday night at 6 p.m. He is doing a 3-part series about your signature strengths and weaknesses and how to use your strengths to not just work, but find a career that you love working. So if you would like to check out those opportunities, you can go to connections.wsu.edu and learn more about them. We'll be here for a few more minutes to answer any questions that you might have, or feel free to email us. Thanks, and have a good afternoon. afternoon.
One thing I just thought of here at the very end, I said I was going to show you the strong interest inventory, and I know I didn't. So if you're interested in the interest inventory, I'll do a quick web tour of it, and I don't think there are any pop-ups for this one, so hopefully you can see it. And if not, just send me an email and I can share the sample with you. But this is just a look at what, if you decide to invest $15 in the strong interest inventory, which is available to WSU students, this is what it looks like. This is Jane's sample, so of course this is a real person. But it talks about how it benefits you. It's some of the things I've talked about before. It'll look at general career interests for one section, basic interests, and then talk more about specific career clusters that could be relevant to you based on interests and disinterests. But it's the same Holland code scale, still REASEC. So it's interesting that they use the sample here only has a 2-letter code, because you'll almost always get a 3-letter code, maybe a 4-letter code. But for this one, it shows the standard scores, and this one's gender norm, so it's even more beneficial because it compares you within gender. So it has, this one's a high differentiated score, because you can see what there's social is the high one in the center, and then moderate interests and artistic, and then little and very little in the other one. So what it'll do is it'll give you basic interest scales. So it'll break down each one of those REASEC letters into either industries or clusters or job types. So for social, it has religion and spirituality, counseling and helping, things like that. Yes, this can absolutely be accessed through the career support page. And you can just send me an email too, and I can send it to you. Let's see, so conventional office management, and you get to see each score for you in each of these areas. So this person who's not a real person, it's very high in counseling and helping, high in writing and mass communication, high in politics and public speaking, and very little in things like mechanics and construction and protective services. So it's just a more accurate look. This is the one that the research really supports. This is the most valid career interest assessment, and this is the one I would recommend. I mean, like I said earlier, what colors your parachute is great for getting started, you know, kind of like from the ground up, and then looking at career, from a career exploration standpoint, this is the best tool, and the research supports that. Occupational scale. So I just want to just quickly show that to you so you get an idea if you can see it, and I'll break down each one. So this person has similar interests with women in this occupation, such as speech pathologist, mental health counselor, special education teacher, and so on and so forth. So that's what that looks like.